You know that parable, The Rich Man and Lazarus?
Mm-hmm.
The one everyone thinks they have figured out?
Right.
Well, get ready for a surprise because we're about to uncover a whole new layer
Okay.
to this biblical head scratcher.
I like it.
This deep dive is
Yeah.
going to take us beyond the surface level
Okay.
and into the part of a fascinating analysis by Otis Sellers.
Sounds good.
We're diving into excerpts from his work, The Rich Man and Lazarus,
Go ahead.
parts 1, 2, and 3.
Right.
He makes a really compelling argument
Okay.
that this isn't just a simple story about rich versus poor,
Mm-hmm.
or even a straightforward lesson about the afterlife.
Okay.
It's easy to get stuck on that common interpretation.
Yeah.
Rich guy ignores the needs of the poor, ends up suffering in hell, while the poor suffering Lazarus is rewarded in heaven.
Right.
Case closed.
Yeah, that's kind of the Sunday school version, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Sellers challenges us to ask, what if we've completely missed the point?
Ooh, I like it.
He points out that if we really dig into the details, that interpretation starts to crumble faster than a day-old croissant.
Okay. All right. So before we get into Sellers' take,
Okay.
let's lay down that common but potentially flawed understanding of the rich man and Lazarus.
Okay.
So many see it as a straightforward moral tale,
Mm-hmm.
a warning against ignoring the plight of the poor.
Right.
The rich man represents those who are indifferent to suffering,
Yeah.
and his fate in the afterlife is a direct result of his earthly actions. Lazarus, on the other hand, embodies the righteous poor who are ultimately rewarded for their suffering.
See, that seems neat and tidy.
Right.
Almost too easy.
Yeah, too easy.
But here's where Sellers throws a wrench in the works.
Okay.
This whole idea of immediate heaven or hell after death,
Yeah.
it doesn't line up with the prevailing Jewish beliefs of Jesus' time.
Okay.
Their concept of the afterlife was much more complex.
Right.
And Sellers uses this to challenge the idea that we should take this story as literal history.
Okay, so he's saying it's not literal history.
Right.
Interesting.
He really zeroes in on the detail of Lazarus being carried by the angels,
Okay.
highlighting that this idea of angels whisking people off to heaven
Yeah.
isn't found in the original Jewish context.
Interesting.
It's like someone airdropped it into the story later on.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
He's showing us how our own modern assumptions about heaven and hell
Yeah.
can distort our understanding of the parable.
That makes sense.
It's like looking at a vintage photo and assuming everyone dressed like that all the time, when really it was just for special occasions.
Right. Okay.
Our 21st century lens can trick us.
Exactly.
So if it's not meant to be taken literally,
Mm-hmm.
is it just your run-of-the-mill parable?
Right.
Well, according to Sellers, not quite.
Okay.
He argues that most parables have these crystal clear parallels to everyday life,
Okay.
offering a moral or spiritual lesson.
Yeah.
But this story,
Yeah.
trying to force-fit those parallels just leaves you with more questions than answers.
Okay. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
It's like trying to jam a giant jigsaw puzzle piece into a puzzle where it just doesn't belong.
Okay. All right. I feel that.
So what's the missing link?
Right.
This is where Sellers drops a bombshell.
Okay.
He believes this parable is actually a brilliant piece of satire.
Oh, satire. Okay.
And to really grasp this, it helps to think about how satire works.
Okay.
A great comparison is Jonathan Swift's Gulliver's Travels.
Okay.
It's not really about a guy who finds giant people and tiny people.
Right.
Swift used satire to poke fun at society,
Right.
to exaggerate things in order to expose human flaws and hypocrisy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Sellers suggests that's precisely what Jesus is doing here,
Okay.
specifically targeting the Pharisees.
The Pharisees. Okay.
Now, for those of you who haven't brushed up on your ancient religious groups lately,
Right.
let's paint a quick picture.
Okay.
Imagine the Pharisees as the religious elite of their time. Think strict rule followers,
Okay.
sticklers for tradition,
Uh-huh.
but often more caught up in appearances and power than genuine compassion.
Right. Got it.
And you can bet they had their critics.
Oh, yeah.
They loved their wealth and status, often turning a blind eye to the plight of the less fortunate.
Of course.
And that's exactly what Jesus takes aim at in this story.
I see where you're going with this.
He's using the sharp, witty storytelling
Yeah.
to expose the hypocrisy lurking beneath their polished facades.
Okay.
Almost like holding up a funhouse mirror to their beliefs.
Interesting.
And remember, for the people hearing this parable for the first time, this would have been edgy, subversive stuff.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Imagine being a Pharisee known for your piety, and suddenly Jesus is calling you out in this clever, cutting way.
Oof. Yeah, that would be awkward.
Talk about awkward.
Right.
Makes you wonder how many people were sneaking side eyes at the Pharisees during that sermon.
I bet a lot. Yeah.
But how exactly does Jesus weave this satire into the story?
Right.
What clues point to the Pharisees being the target of this seemingly simple tale?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Well, that's what we're going to unpack in part 2 of this deep dive.
Okay, I'm ready. Welcome back. Last time we left off with this idea that this parable might not be what it seems.
Right. Instead of a straightforward lesson about the afterlife, Otis Sellers suggests Jesus was using satire to expose the hypocrisy of the Pharisees.
Exactly.
And if you were Pharisees in the crowd that day hearing this story for the first time, you'd probably be squirming in your seat a little.
Oh, yeah.
Because Jesus is about to dismantle their entire belief system. And he's doing it with a razor-sharp wit that would make even a stand-up comedian jealous.
I love it. Okay, so how does he do it?
Well, let's dive back into the story.
Okay.
Specifically, that conversation between Abraham and the rich man in the afterlife.
Right.
Remember, the rich man is begging for a drop of water from Lazarus, who's chilling with Abraham.
Okay.
And it's Abraham's response that really gets interesting, especially when you consider the Pharisees.
Okay, I'm with him.
Abraham tells him, "Son, remember that in your lifetime you received your good things and likewise Lazarus evil things. But now he is comforted and you are tormented."
Okay.
Taken at face value.
Yeah.
This seems to support the idea that those who suffer in life will be rewarded in the afterlife.
Right, like a simple quid pro quo, right?
Yeah, it's a comforting thought if you're going through a rough time.
Sure.
But Sellers suggests this line plays right into the Pharisees' distorted theology.
Okay, how so?
He argues they twisted this idea of divine justice to maintain their own power and privilege.
Oh, I see.
It's like they took a basic truth and concorded it to fit their own narrative.
To fit their own narrative, right.
They preached that the poor would be rewarded in the afterlife as a way to keep them content in their current situation.
Wow, what a scam.
Right. It was a convenient way to avoid addressing the systemic issues, the inequality that they benefited from.
Exactly. Classic.
Classic case of do as I say, not as I do. Right.
Totally, yeah.
But Jesus flips the script on them here.
Okay.
By following their logic to its absurd conclusion,
Yeah.
he exposes the ridiculousness of their position.
Okay, I like it.
Imagine being that rich man burning in the afterlife, being told by Abraham, of all people, a man of great wealth himself, that the reason for his suffering is that he had the audacity to enjoy his wealth during his lifetime.
The irony is palpable.
It's like blaming someone for getting rained on because they chose to wear a nice outfit that day.
Right.
It makes absolutely no sense.
That makes no sense.
And that's exactly Sellers' point.
Yeah.
He wants us to see the absurdity of it all.
The absurdity, yeah.
But the satire doesn't stop there.
Okay.
The rich man, in a last-ditch effort to save his brothers from the same fate, begs Abraham to send Lazarus back to warn them.
Okay.
This detail, according to Sellers, uncovers another Pharisaic flaw.
What's that?
Their insatiable need for signs and wonders.
Oh, they wanted proof.
They were obsessed with the spectacular, always demanding proof beyond what God had already provided.
Yeah.
They had the scriptures, the prophets, and yet they still demanded more, always looking for the next big sign.
Right.
The undeniable proof to convince them to believe.
Right. Okay.
And the rich man's plea echoes that mindset perfectly.
Okay.
It's like he's saying, sure, my brothers won't listen to scripture or heed the words of the prophets, but a ghost story, a visitor from the afterlife, now that'll get their attention.
Right. That'll get their attention, yeah.
And what's fascinating is that Abraham's response cuts right through the noise.
What does he say?
He simply states, they have Moses, and the prophets let them hear them. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the most profound truths are found in the everyday, in the things we often overlook or take for granted.
Yeah.
It's like ignoring a carefully crafted map because you're waiting for a helicopter to airlift you to your destination.
Right.
But the real mic drop moment comes in Abraham's final line.
Okay, let's hear.
If they hear not Moses and the prophets, neither will they be persuaded though one rose from the dead.
Wow.
Talk about a reality check.
Right.
That one line.
Yeah.
Jesus dismantles their entire belief system.
Wow.
It's a powerful statement about the nature of belief itself, that sometimes even the most extraordinary evidence won't penetrate a heart that's closed off to the truth.
Right. It's like you can't logic someone out of a position they didn't logic themselves into.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like trying to argue with someone who refuses to acknowledge basic facts.
Right.
No amount of evidence will convince them because their mind is already made up.
Yeah, their mind is made up.
But beyond the humor and the social commentary,
Yeah.
Sellers highlights that There's a message here for us today.
Yeah.
A message that transcends time and culture.
Right.
He doesn't want us to just analyze the Pharisees from a safe distance.
Right.
He wants us to look inward
Okay. Yeah.
to examine our own hearts.
To examine our own hearts.
Okay. He challenges us to ask, where do we see echoes of the Pharisees in our own lives?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We're wrapping up our exploration of the rich man and Lazarus.
Okay.
And let me tell you, this parable just keeps getting deeper.
It really does.
We've been digging into Otis Sellers' interpretation.
Right.
And he makes a strong case that this isn't just a simple morality tale.
It's more nuanced than that.
He believes Jesus was using satire to expose the hypocrisy of the Pharisees.
Right, exactly.
But here's the thing.
Okay.
Sellers doesn't want us to just analyze this from a distance, like it's some ancient history lesson.
Right.
He wants us to apply it to our own lives.
To our own lives. Okay.
He asks us to consider, where do we see echoes of the Pharisees in ourselves?
Ooh.
What are our own blind spots?
That's a tough question.
It is a question worth pondering, isn't it?
It is.
Because it's easy to point fingers at the hypocrisy of others.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But recognizing our own capacity for self-deception, that takes some real soul-searching.
It really does.
It's like that saying,
What's that?
we often see the world not as it is, but as we are.
Oh, yeah.
So if we're honest with ourselves, we've all probably had moments where our actions didn't quite line up with our values.
Oh, absolutely.
We might talk a big game about compassion, but then turn a blind eye to the needs of someone less fortunate.
Yeah.
Or maybe we cling to comfortable interpretations of faith, even when they feel out of sync with the complexities of the world.
Okay. Yeah, I see what you mean.
It's that human tendency to prioritize our own comfort, our own sense of righteousness, even at the expense of others.
Right.
And that's something Jesus challenged over and over again, not just in this parable, but throughout his ministry.
Absolutely.
He constantly called out hypocrisy, especially among those who considered themselves religious.
Makes you think.
Remember that line from earlier where Abraham tells the rich man that he received his good things in life?
Yeah.
It's almost like Jesus is saying, be careful what you wish for.
Oh, wow.
Because if we buy into the idea that wealth and comfort are the ultimate measures of God's favor, then we risk becoming blind to the needs around us.
Right.
We start seeing suffering as a sign of God's disfavor rather than an opportunity for compassion and action.
That's a good point.
And that's the beauty of satire.
What is it?
It has this uncanny ability to hold up a mirror to our own souls.
Yeah.
It makes us laugh, yes, but it also makes us think, squirm a little, and hopefully even change.
Hopefully change.
It's like a good friend who's not afraid to call you out on your stuff, but does it with love.
Yeah.
Because they want to see you grow.
If they love you.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I think the key takeaway is this.
Okay, what is it?
The parable of the rich man and Lazarus is more than just a story about wealth, poverty, or even the afterlife.
Okay.
It's a call to self-reflection.
Self-reflection.
A reminder that true faith is about aligning our actions with our values.
Okay.
Even when it's uncomfortable, even when it challenges our preconceived notions.
Right. It's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that the measure of our lives isn't how much we accumulate or how comfortable we are, but how we treat those who are less fortunate.
Yeah.
How we respond to suffering.
Okay.
And how willing we are to challenge our own biases and blind spots.
Our own biases. Yeah.
It's about asking ourselves those tough questions.
Yeah.
The ones that make us squirm a little, because that's where real growth happens.
I like that a lot.
So the next time you encounter this parable, don't just skim over it. Let it challenge you. Let it push you to be more compassionate, more self-aware, and more willing to live out your faith in a way that reflects the heart of Jesus.
That's a great word.
That's all the time we have for today's deep dive.
Okay.
We hope this conversation sparked some new insights and maybe even inspired you to continue exploring this parable on your own.
So good.
Until next time, keep those questions coming.
Yes.
And keep diving deep.